Dr. Amelia Washington rubbed her tired eyes as she walked through the automatic doors of Metropolitan Hospital. It was 2:47 a.m., and she had just finished a grueling 12-hour shift in the emergency room. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair was pulled, back in a messy bun, and all she wanted was to get home to her small apartment and collapse into bed. The parking garage was nearly empty except for a few cars belonging to the night shift workers. Amelia's black BMW sat under a flickering fluorescent light, looking like a beacon in the darkness. She had worked double shifts for 3 months straight to afford the down payment on that car. It wasn't flashy or expensive by luxury standards, but it was hers, and it represented years of hard work through medical school and residency. As she settled into the driver's seat, Amelia let out a long sigh. The night had been particularly rough. They had lost a patient, a young father who came in after a car accident. Despite their best efforts, they couldn't save him. These were the moments that made her question why she had chosen emergency medicine. But deep down, she knew she was making a difference. The drive home should have taken 15 minutes. The streets were empty, just the way she liked them after her late shifts. No traffic, no stress, just the quiet hum of her car and the soft jazz playing on the radio. She drove carefully, always mindful of her speed. As a black woman driving a nice car late at night, she had learned to be extra cautious. Her mother had given her the talk about interactions with police when she was just 16, and those lessons had stayed with her. Amelia was thinking about the patient's family, wondering how they were coping with their loss, when she saw the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Her heart sank immediately. She looked down at her speedometer. She was going 28 mph in a 30-hour zone. There was no reason for this stop. She pulled over slowly, making sure to use her turn, signal and stop in a well-lit area near a 24-hour gas station. Her hands were shaking slightly as she turned off the engine. Without thinking, she pressed the emergency button on her phone, activating the automatic recording feature she had installed months earlier after hearing too many stories like the one she was about to experience. The officer took his time getting out of his patrol car. Through her side mirror, she could see him checking something on his computer, probably running her plates. When he finally approached her window, Amelia had already retrieved her license and registration, keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer Derek Mitchell was a tall man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. He had been on the force for 12 years and carried himself with the swagger of someone who was used to being in control. When he looked at Amelia through her window, she could see his expression change. He had expected someone different. "Do you know why I pulled you over tonight?" Mitchell asked, his voice sharp and accusatory. "No, officer, I don't," Amelia replied calmly. "I was driving under the speed limit and following all traffic laws." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Step out of the vehicle." "May I ask why?" Amelia kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. She had done nothing wrong, and there was no reason for her to get out of the car. "I said step out of the vehicle," Mitchell repeated, his hand moving to rest on his belt near his weapon. "Now." Amelia complied, moving slowly and deliberately. She had been taught never to make sudden movements during police encounters. As she stood beside her car, she noticed the gas station attendant watching through the window. At least someone was witnessing this. "I can smell marijuana coming from your vehicle," Mitchell announced, though Amelia knew this was impossible. She had never used drugs in her life, and her car smelled like the hospital disinfectant that clung to her scrubs. "Officer, I'm a doctor at Metropolitan Hospital," she said, trying to keep her voice professional. "I just finished my shift and I can assure you there are no drugs in my vehicle. You're welcome to verify my employment." Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right, and I'm the mayor. You think I was born yesterday?" The disbelief in his voice was clear. Here was a young black woman in scrubs driving a BMW claiming to be a doctor. In Mitchell's mind, it didn't add up. He had made assumptions the moment he saw her, and now he was committed to proving himself right. "I'm going to search your vehicle," Mitchell said, walking toward the passenger side. "And when I find what I'm looking for, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do." "Officer, you don't have probable cause to search my car," Amelia said. her medical training helping her stay calm under pressure. Claiming you smell marijuana when there clearly isn't any doesn't constitute probable cause. This was the wrong thing to say. Mitchell spun around, his face red with anger. Are you trying to tell me how to do my job? Are you some kind of lawyer? Now too? I'm simply stating my rights, Amelia replied. I'm cooperating fully, but I know you need probable cause or my consent to search my vehicle, and I don't consent. Mitchell's radio crackled to life, but he ignored it. He was focused entirely on Amelia now, seeing her not as a person but as a challenge to his authority. In his 12 years on the force, he had grown accustomed to people doing exactly what he told them to do without question. This young woman's knowledge of her rights irritated him. Turn around and put your hands on the car, Mitchell ordered. Officer, what am I being arrested for? Amelia asked, but she complied with his order. The metal of her car was cold against her palms. You're not under arrest yet, Mitchell said, but you're being detained for investigation of drug possession. As Mitchell began to pat her down, Amelia focused on staying calm. She thought about her patients, about the lives she had saved, about all the good she was doing in the world. This was temporary. This would pass. But deep down, she knew that this encounter was about more than a traffic stop. This was about power, assumptions, and the color of her skin. Mitchell found her medical ID in her scrub pocket and examined it with suspicion. This could be fake, he muttered, though the ID was clearly authentic. You can call the hospital to verify, Amelia offered. The number is on the ID. But Mitchell wasn't interested in verification. He had already decided what this encounter was about, and evidence to the contrary only made him more determined to find something, anything that would justify his actions. I'm calling for backup, Mitchell announced, reaching for his radio. I've got a situation here. As he made the call, describing Amelia as a suspicious individual and possible drug possession, she realized that this was escalating beyond anything she had imagined. Her phone, still recording in her purse, was capturing every word. The gas station attendant had come outside now, pretending to clean the windows but clearly watching the interaction. A few late-night travelers had pulled into the station and were also observing the scene. Amelia felt exposed and humiliated, but she also felt a strange sense of determination. She was going to handle this with dignity no matter what happened. When Mitchell finished his radio call, he turned back to Amelia with a look that made her blood run cold. His hand was resting on his weapon, and she could see that he was agitated, possibly looking for any excuse to escalate the situation further. I want you to know, Amelia said quietly, that I have nothing but respect for law enforcement. I work with police officers every day at the hospital. I treat them when they're injured, and I've seen the dangerous work you do. I'm not your enemy. For a moment, Mitchell seemed to hesitate, but then his expression hardened again. Save the speech, he said. We'll see what we find when backup gets here. As they waited for the other officers to arrive, Amelia stood silently, beside her car, her hand still resting on the hood. She could feel Mitchell watching her, waiting for her to do something that would give him reason to act. But she remained perfectly still, perfectly calm, drawing on years of medical training that had taught her how to stay composed under pressure. The night air was cool, and she could hear the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Normal people, living normal lives, going about their business without being stopped and humiliated for no reason. She thought about her parents, who had worked so hard to give her opportunities they never had. She thought about her colleagues at the hospital, who respected her skill and dedication, and she thought about how this one encounter could have been so different if Mitchell had simply seen her as a human being instead of a stereotype. In her purse, her phone continued recording, capturing every moment of an encounter that would soon change everything. The backup unit was taking longer than expected to arrive, and Mitchell was growing more impatient by the minute. He began walking around her car looking for any excuse to search it. He peered through the windows, checked the license plates again, and even kicked one of the tires. Amelia watched all of this in silence, knowing that anything she said would only make things worse. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was simply to survive the encounter and deal with the consequences later. But as she stood there in the fluorescent light of the gas station, being treated like a criminal for the crime of driving while black, she made a promise to herself. This wouldn't be the end of the story, this would be the beginning. The backup unit finally arrived 23 minutes after Mitchell had called for assistance. Officer Patricia Hayes stepped out of her patrol car, immediately sensing the tension in the air. She had worked with Mitchell before and knew he had a reputation for escalating situations unnecessarily, but she also knew better than to question her senior partner in public. "What's the situation here, Derek?" Hayes asked, approaching the scene where Amelia still stood with her hands on her car. "Got a possible drug possession case," Mitchell replied, his voice carrying the authority he felt he deserved. "Subject claims to be a doctor, but something doesn't smell right." Hayes looked at Amelia, taking in her scrubs, her hospital ID badge that was clearly visible, and her calm demeanor. Something about Mitchell's assessment didn't sit right with her, but she had learned that challenging Mitchell's judgment often led to workplace complications she preferred to avoid. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to turn around," Mitchell ordered. "Amelia." As Amelia slowly turned to face the officers, Hayes could see the exhaustion in her eyes, but also something else, a quiet strength that spoke to years of dealing with difficult situations. It was the same look she had seen on nurses and doctors when they delivered bad news to families. Professional, composed, but unmistakably human. "Dr. Washington," Amelia said, introducing herself properly for the first time since the stop began. "I'm an emergency room physician at Metropolitan Hospital. I just finished a 12-hour shift and was driving home when Officer Mitchell pulled me over." "She keeps insisting she's a doctor," Mitchell said to Hayes, as if Amelia weren't standing. "Right there. Claims she was just leaving work, but look at this car. How does someone working at a hospital afford a BMW?" Hayes shifted uncomfortably. She knew plenty of doctors who drove expensive cars. Her own family physician drove a Mercedes. But she also knew that questioning Mitchell's logic in front of a civilian would create problems for her later. "Officer Mitchell," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the surreal nature of the situation, "I have my medical license, my hospital ID, my insurance information, and my registration. Everything is properly documented. I'm happy to provide any information you need to verify my identity and employment." Mitchell's body cam was recording the entire interaction, though he seemed to have forgotten this fact. Later, investigators would note how his behavior contradicted everything he had been trained to do during routine traffic stops. "Here's what I think happened," Mitchell said, beginning to pace back and forth like a prosecutor making a case to a jury. "I think you borrowed this car from someone, maybe your boyfriend, maybe someone you work for as a house cleaner or something. I think you've got drugs in here, and when I find them, this whole doctor story is going to fall apart." The words hit Amelia like a physical blow. In a single sentence, Mitchell had dismissed her education, her career, her achievements, and her worth as a human being. He had reduced her to stereotypes that had nothing to do with who she was or what she had accomplished. "Officer Mitchell," Amelia said, her voice beginning to show the strain of the encounter, "I graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School. I completed my residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. I have been working in emergency medicine for 4 years, and I have saved lives. I am not a drug dealer, I am not a criminal, and I am not lying to you." But Mitchell was no longer listening. In his mind, he had already decided what this encounter was about, and Amelia's credentials were simply obstacles to overcome rather than facts to acknowledge. "We're going to search this vehicle," Mitchell announced to Hayes. "I've got probable cause based on the marijuana smell." Hayes looked around. They were standing in an open area near a gas station. The night air was clear and cool. She couldn't smell marijuana, and she doubted Mitchell could either. But challenging him now would mean filling out incident reports and dealing with internal affairs questions that she preferred to avoid. "Dr. Washington," Hayes said, trying to sound official while also being somewhat gentler than her partner, "we're going to need to search your vehicle. It's standard procedure." "Standard procedure for what?" Amelia asked. "I wasn't speeding, I wasn't driving erratically, I haven't committed any traffic violations, and there's no probable cause for a search. What exactly am I suspected of doing?" This was the question that neither officer wanted to answer honestly. The truth was that Amelia was suspected of being a black woman driving a nice car late at night, and in Mitchell's experience, That meant she was probably up to something illegal. "You're being awfully defensive for someone who has nothing to hide," Mitchell said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "Maybe we should call for a K-9 unit. Let the dogs tell us what's really in that car." Amelia closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on every meditation technique she had learned during her high-stress medical training. She thought about her patients who had faced impossible odds and somehow found the strength to keep fighting. She thought about her grandmother, who had lived through segregation and taught her that dignity was something no one could take away from you. "Officer Mitchell," she said, opening her eyes and looking directly at him, "I want you to know that I understand you're doing your job, but I also want you to understand that I am a professional, just like you are. I have dedicated my life to helping people, including police officers. Just last week I treated an officer who had been shot in the line of duty. I stayed with him for 6 hours to make sure he survived. His name was Officer Rodriguez from the 2nd Precinct. You can call and verify that if you'd like." For a moment, something flickered in Mitchell's eyes. Hayes noticed it too, a brief moment of uncertainty, as if he was beginning to realize that maybe his initial assessment had been wrong. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the stubborn determination of someone who had gone too far to back down now. "Anyone can make up stories," Mitchell said dismissively. "I've heard every sob story in the book." By now, more people had noticed the commotion. The gas station attendant had been joined by 2 customers who were pretending to shop while actually watching the interaction through the windows. A couple in an SUV had pulled into the parking lot and were openly staring at the scene. Amelia felt exposed and humiliated, but she also realized that these witnesses might be important later. Mitchell began circling her car again, looking for any excuse to justify a search. He peered through the windows with his flashlight, checked the tires for signs of tampering, and even examined the license plate mounting to see if it looked suspicious. "This registration is recent," he announced, as if he had discovered something significant. "Got this car just a few months ago. Where'd you get the money for this, Dr. Washington?" The way he said doctor made it clear he didn't believe her. Title was real. It was the same tone people used when they put air quotes around words they thought were lies. "Officer Mitchell, I purchased this car with money I earned working as a physician," Amelia replied. "I have the loan documents, insurance papers, and purchase agreement in my glove compartment if you'd like to see them." "Oh, I'll be looking." "At everything," Mitchell said. "Hayes, start with the trunk. I'll check the interior." "Wait," Amelia said, finally reaching her breaking point. "You still haven't told me what crime I'm suspected of committing. You can't just search someone's property because you don't think they should own it." Mitchell stopped dead in his tracks and turned to face her. His hand moved to his weapon, and for the first time since the encounter began, Amelia felt genuinely afraid. "Are you resisting?" Mitchell asked, his voice deadly serious. "Are you interfering with a police investigation?" "I'm asking about my constitutional rights," Amelia replied, but she could hear her voice shaking slightly now. "The same rights that apply to everyone." "Your rights?" Mitchell laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me tell you about your rights. You have the right to do exactly what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. Anything else is resistance, and resistance has consequences." Hayes looked increasingly uncomfortable. She had been a police officer for 8 years, and she had never seen a routine traffic stop handled this way. But Mitchell was the senior officer, and she had been taught to follow his lead. "Dr. Washington," Hayes said, trying to defuse the situation, "if you could just cooperate with the search, we can get this resolved quickly, and you can be on your way." "I am cooperating," Amelia said. "I've answered every question, provided every document requested, and followed every instruction. But cooperation doesn't mean giving up my constitutional rights." Mitchell's radio crackled again, and this time he answered it. Dispatch was asking for a status update on the traffic stop. Mitchell walked a few steps away to respond, and Hayes took the opportunity to speak quietly with Amelia. "Look," Hayes said, lowering her voice, "I can see your hospital ID, and I believe you're a doctor. But Mitchell's made up his mind about this search, and fighting him isn't going to help your situation." Amelia looked at the younger officer and saw something in her eyes that gave her a tiny bit of hope. Doubt. Hayes wasn't comfortable with how this was being handled, even if she wasn't willing to speak up about it. "Officer Hayes," Amelia said quietly, "I want you to know that this isn't about me trying to get away with something. This is about being treated." After 45 minutes of harassment, Mitchell finally allowed Amelia to retrieve her medical license from her wallet. He examined it with the suspicious eye of someone determined to find fault, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgery. The license was authentic, issued by the State Medical Board, with all the proper security features and Amelia's photograph clearly visible. "This could still be fake," Mitchell muttered, though even he seemed to be running out of excuses. Officer Hayes had completed her reluctant search of the trunk and found nothing except medical textbooks, a spare stethoscope, and workout clothes. The interior search had yielded equally innocent results: hospital parking receipts, medical journals, and a half-empty coffee cup that smelled like the cafeteria at Metropolitan Hospital. "Derek," Hayes said quietly, "maybe we should finish our investigation." Mitchell cut her off sharply. He wasn't ready to admit that he had been wrong, especially not in front of witnesses who were still watching from the gas station. But Amelia had reached her limit. Standing there in the cool night air, being treated like a criminal while people watched, she made a decision that would change everything. She thought about Dr. Robert Chen, her colleague and friend from the hospital. Robert was the consulting physician for the police department, reviewing cases where officers needed medical clearance to return to duty. More importantly, he was well connected in the community and had the kind of social standing that people like Mitchell couldn't easily dismiss. "Officer Mitchell," Amelia said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion, "I'd like to make a phone call." "You're not under arrest," Mitchell replied. "You don't get phone calls during a traffic stop." "I'd like to call my colleague Dr. Chen," Amelia continued, ignoring his dismissal. "He's the consulting physician for your police department. I think he can verify my identity in a way that will satisfy your concerns." Mitchell's face darkened. "I don't care who you think you know. We're not done here." But Hayes was listening, carefully. She knew Dr. Chen's name from department briefings. He was the physician who evaluated officers after injuries and cleared them for duty. He was also known to be friends with the police chief and several city council members. "What's Dr. Chen's first name?" Hayes asked, stepping closer to Amelia. "Robert Chen," Amelia replied. "He's been the department's consulting physician for about 3 years. He has an office on 5th Street, and he also works shifts in our emergency department. We worked together just yesterday on a multiple car accident that came in around noon." Hayes looked at Mitchell with growing concern. If this woman really knew Dr. Chen well enough to call him at 3 in the morning, and if Dr. Chen actually came to the scene, Mitchell's aggressive handling of this stop would become very difficult to explain. "She's just name-dropping," Mitchell said, but there was less confidence in his voice now. "Probably looked him up on the internet or something." "Officer Mitchell," Amelia said, pulling her phone from her purse. "Dr. Chen and I have worked dozens of cases together. He was my attending physician when I treated Officer Rodriguez last week. He'll remember me, and he'll be able to confirm everything I've told you tonight." The mention of Officer Rodriguez seemed to hit a nerve. Hayes knew Rodriguez personally. He had been shot during a domestic violence call and had indeed been treated at Metropolitan Hospital. If this woman had really been involved in saving his life, then everything about this stop was wrong. "Leto, her make the call," Hayes said quietly to Mitchell. "Absolutely not," Mitchell snapped. "We don't let suspects start calling their friends in the middle of an investigation." "I'm not a suspect," Amelia said firmly. "You haven't articulated any crime that I'm suspected of committing. You've searched my car and found nothing. You've examined my identification and found it to be authentic. I'm a physician driving home from work, and I have the right to contact a colleague who can verify my identity." Mitchell was trapped, and he knew it. He had gone too far to back down, but he also knew that if Dr. Chen actually showed up and confirmed Amelia's story, there would be serious questions about his conduct. 5 minutes, Mitchell said finally. "Make your call." Amelia dialed Dr. Chen's number with shaking fingers. It was after 3 a.m., and she felt terrible about waking him up. But she knew Robert well enough to know that he would want to be called. "Robert? It's Amelia Washington," she said when he answered on the 3rd ring. I'm sorry to wake you, but I need your help. Amelia, what's wrong? Are you at the hospital? No, I'm on Maple Street near the Shell station. I've been pulled over by police officers who don't believe I'm a doctor. They've been detaining me for almost an hour, and I was hoping you could come and verify my identity. There was a long pause. On the other end of the line, Dr. Chen was fully awake now, and Amelia could hear him moving around, probably getting dressed. They don't believe you're a doctor? Dr. Chen asked, his voice incredulous. Amelia, you're one of the best ER physicians I've ever worked with. What officers are you dealing with? Amelia looked at Mitchell's name tag. Officer Mitchell and Officer Hayes from the Metropolitan Police. I'll be right there, Dr. Chen said without hesitation. Don't hang up the phone until I arrive. Mitchell tried to grab the phone from Amelia's hand. That's enough. End the call. Dr. Chen is on his way, Amelia said, holding the phone away. From Mitchell. He should be here in about 10 minutes. I don't care if the president is coming, Mitchell said, but his bravado was beginning to crack. We're writing you citations and releasing you. Citations for what? Amelia asked. Mitchell had to think for a moment. In all his years of police work, he had never encountered a situation where he had detained someone for this long without finding evidence of a crime or being able to articulate a clear violation. Speeding, Mitchell said finally. I wasn't speeding. I was going 28 miles per hour in a 35 zone. Reckless driving, Mitchell tried again. Officer Hayes was here for the entire encounter, Amelia said. She can testify that I was driving safely and following all traffic laws. Hayes looked increasingly uncomfortable. She had seen the whole thing and she knew Amelia had done nothing wrong. Failure to comply with a lawful order, Mitchell said desperately. I complied with every order you gave me, Amelia replied. I got out of my car when you asked. I submitted to a search. I provided all requested documentation. I have been cooperative throughout this entire encounter. Mitchell was running out of options, and they all knew it. In the distance, they could hear a car approaching quickly. Dr. Chen was driving faster than he normally would, motivated by concern for his colleague and growing anger at what he was hearing. When Dr. Chen's silver Mercedes pulled into the gas station parking lot, Mitchell's heart sank. This wasn't some random person Amelia had called for help. This was clearly a successful professional, someone who moved with confidence and authority. Dr. Chen stepped out of his car wearing jeans and a hastily thrown-on shirt, but his presence commanded immediate respect. He was a tall man with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. More importantly, he carried himself like someone who was accustomed to being listened to. Dr. Washington, he said, walking directly to Amelia with obvious concern. Are you all right? I'm fine, Robert, just tired and frustrated, Amelia replied. Thank you for coming. Dr. Chen turned to face the two officers, and his expression was anything but friendly. Officers, I'm Dr. Robert Chen. Dr. Washington is my colleague and one of the finest emergency room physicians in this city. Could someone please explain to me why she's been detained for over an hour? Mitchell tried to salvage the situation. Dr. Chen, we were investigating a possible drug possession case. The subject claimed to be a doctor, but we needed to verify. The subject? Dr. Chen interrupted, his voice sharp with disbelief. Officer, this is Dr. Amelia Washington. She graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School with honors. She completed her residency at Massachusetts General Hospital. She has been saving lives in our emergency department for 4 years. Just yesterday, she worked with me to save the life of Officer Rodriguez, who was shot in the line of duty. Hayes stepped forward, looking relieved to finally have someone who could end this nightmare. Dr. Chen, I'm Officer Hayes. I've heard your name mentioned in our department briefings. I want you to know that I believed Dr. Washington from the beginning, but you let this continue anyway, Dr. Chen said, his disappointment clear. Officer Hayes, I work with your department regularly. I know the training you receive. I know the protocols you're supposed to follow. There is nothing about this situation that required an hour-long detention. Mitchell was growing desperate. Dr. Chen, with all due respect, we have procedures to follow. We can't just take someone's word. Officer Mitchell, Dr. Chen interrupted. Dr. Washington has proper identification, hospital credentials, and medical licenses that are easily verifiable. A simple phone call to the hospital would have confirmed her identity in 2 minutes. Instead, you chose to treat a respected physician like a criminal for over an hour. Dr. Chen pulled out his own phone and dialed a number. Chief Morrison, it's Robert Chen. I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. The next morning, Amelia sat in her apartment listening to the audio recording from her phone for the third time. Each time she heard Mitchell's voice dismissing her credentials and threatening to escalate the situation, she felt a mixture of anger and sadness. But she also felt something else: determination. This couldn't be allowed to continue happening to other people. Dr. Chen had stayed with her at the gas station until 4:30 a.m., making sure she got home safely and promising to follow up with the police chief later that morning. Before leaving, he had given her the business card of Angela Torres, a civil rights attorney who specialized in police misconduct cases. Amelia, Dr. Chen had said, I want you to know that what happened tonight was completely unacceptable. Mitchell's behavior violated every principle of professional law enforcement. You have my full support in whatever action you decide to take. Now, sitting in her kitchen with a cup of coffee and Angela Torres's business card in front of her, Amelia made the call that would transform this from a personal grievance into a legal case with far-reaching consequences. Ms. Torres, this is Dr. Amelia Washington. Dr. Chen gave me your number. I need to speak with you about a police encounter I had last night. Angela Torres had been practicing civil rights law for 15 years, and she had heard hundreds of stories like Amelia's. But when Amelia mentioned that she had a complete audio recording of the encounter, Torres knew this case was different. Dr. Washington, I'd like to meet with you this afternoon if possible. Bring the recording and any other documentation you have. Don't share the recording with anyone else until we've had a chance to discuss your options. The meeting took place at Torres's downtown office at 2 p.m. Torres was a small woman with sharp eyes and an intense manner that spoke to years of fighting difficult battles in courtrooms across the state. She listened to the entire recording without interruption, taking notes and occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. Dr. Washington, Torres said when the recording finished, this is one of the clearest cases of racial profiling and police misconduct I've ever encountered. Officer Mitchell's behavior violates multiple department policies and several constitutional principles. What happens now? Amelia asked. Now we investigate, Torres replied. But first I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for this to become public? Because once we file a complaint, this story is going to get attention, and not all of that attention will be positive. Amelia had already considered this question during her sleepless morning. Ms. Torres, I became a doctor to help people. If staying quiet means that Officer Mitchell continues treating other people the way he treated me, then I'm not helping anyone. I'm prepared to go public. Torres nodded approvingly. Good, because we're going to need to be thorough and aggressive. The first step is filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, but I also want to research Mitchell's history. Officers who behave this way rarely limit it to a single incident. While Torres began her investigation, Dr. Chen was having his own meeting with Police Chief Morrison. The chief was a veteran officer who had worked his way up through the ranks over 25 years. He prided himself on running a professional department, and Mitchell's conduct was an embarrassment that could damage the reputation he had worked hard to build. Robert, I've reviewed Mitchell's report from last night, Chief Morrison said, sliding a folder across his desk. His version of events doesn't match what you witnessed, does it? Dr. Chen shook his head. Chief, Mitchell's report makes it sound like Dr. Washington was uncooperative and suspicious. The truth is that she was professional, respectful, and completely compliant throughout the encounter. She provided proper identification, submitted to an illegal search, and answered every question he asked. What's your assessment of her claims about being treated differently because of her race, Doctor? Chen paused, choosing his words carefully. Chief, I've worked with your department for 3 years. I've seen hundreds of traffic stops, and I've never seen an officer refuse to verify someone's credentials for over an hour. I've never seen someone in medical scrubs with hospital identification treated as a drug dealer. If Dr. Washington had been a white woman driving home from her job at the hospital, I don't believe this encounter would have lasted 5 minutes. Chief Morrison nodded grimly. He had reached the same conclusion, but hearing it from someone he respected confirmed his worst fears about the incident. I'm opening an internal affairs investigation, the chief said. Mitchell will be on administrative leave pending the outcome. But Robert, I need you to know that this might get complicated. If Dr. Washington decides to pursue legal action, this could become a very public case. She has every right to pursue legal action, Dr. Chen replied. What Mitchell did was wrong, and if there are consequences for that, then maybe it will prevent similar incidents in the future. Meanwhile, Angela Torres was discovering that Mitchell's encounter with Amelia was far from an isolated incident. Her investigation revealed a troubling pattern of behavior stretching back several years. 3 other cases stood out immediately. 2 years earlier, Mitchell had detained a black businessman for 40 minutes, claiming he was driving a suspicious luxury car. The man turned out to be a bank vice president driving home from a late board meeting. The case had been settled quietly by the city for an undisclosed amount. The previous year, Mitchell had arrested a black college student for disorderly conduct after she questioned why she was being stopped while walking to her car in a parking garage. The charges were dropped, but not before the student spent a night in jail. Most recently, just 6 months ago, Mitchell had conducted what he called a random safety check of a black family's SUV during a routine traffic stop. The family included 3 young children who were forced to stand on the sidewalk in the rain while Mitchell searched their vehicle for no apparent reason. That case was still working its way through the complaint process. This is a pattern, Torres explained to Amelia during their second meeting. Mitchell has been targeting people of color for years, but the complaints were handled individually and quietly settled. No one connected the dots until now. How did he get away with it for so long? Amelia asked. Because most people don't have audio recordings of their encounters, Torres replied. And because the police department has been more interested in making these cases go away quietly than in addressing the underlying problem. Torres had also discovered something else interesting about Mitchell's career. His performance evaluations showed that he had received complaints about his attitude and approach to policing, but supervisors had consistently overlooked these issues or dismissed them as personality conflicts. Officer Hayes, the younger officer, who was with Mitchell, Torres continued, has agreed to speak with Internal Affairs. She's confirming that Mitchell's behavior was inappropriate and that you were completely cooperative throughout the encounter. The case took an unexpected turn when Torres received a call from the mayor's office. Mayor Patricia Williams had been briefed on the incident and wanted to meet personally with Amelia. Dr. Washington, Mayor Williams said during their meeting at City Hall, I want to start by apologizing on behalf of the city for what you experienced. Officer Mitchell's conduct was completely unacceptable, and it doesn't represent the values of our police department or our community. Thank you, Mayor. Williams, I appreciate your concern, but I'm more interested in making sure this doesn't happen to other people. That's exactly what I want to discuss with you, the mayor replied. This incident has highlighted some serious problems in our police department's training and accountability systems. I'd like you to consider serving on a civilian oversight committee that we're forming to review police practices and recommend reforms. Amelia was surprised by the offer. She had expected the city to be defensive and try to minimize the incident. Instead, they seemed genuinely interested in using it as an opportunity for improvement. I'd be honored to serve, Amelia said. But I want to make sure this isn't just for show. Real change requires real commitment. Dr. Washington, I've been mayor for 8 years and I've seen too many cases like this swept under the rug. Your recording and Dr. Chen's testimony have given us an opportunity to address these issues head-on. I don't want to waste that opportunity. The mayor's support added another powerful ally to Amelia's cause, but it also meant that the case was attracting high-level political attention. News of the incident began leaking to local media outlets, and soon reporters were asking questions about Mitchell's history and the police department's handling of racial profiling complaints. Channel 7 News ran the first story 3 weeks after the incident. The reporter, investigative journalist Kevin Park, had obtained public records showing the pattern of complaints against Mitchell and the settlements the city had paid to resolve them quietly. Tonight at 11, we investigate claims that a veteran police officer has been targeting black drivers for years, and why city officials failed to stop him, Park announced during the evening news teaser. The story aired with dramatic footage of the gas station where Amelia had been detained, interviews with Torres and Dr. Chen, and graphics showing the pattern of complaints against Mitchell over time. While 6 months after that fateful night at the gas station, Officer Derek Mitchell sat in his lawyer's office staring at a stack of legal documents that represented the complete destruction of everything he had worked for over 12 years in law enforcement. The federal civil rights charges, the wrongful termination lawsuit he had filed against the city, the public humiliation. It had all stemmed from one traffic stop that he couldn't let go. The audio recording from Amelia's phone had become the centerpiece of multiple legal proceedings, and every time it was played in court, Mitchell's situation got worse. But it wasn't just the recording from that night that had destroyed his career. Angela Torres's investigation had uncovered something that even she hadn't expected to find. 3 days after Mitchell's termination, Torres had received an anonymous tip from someone inside the police department. The caller claimed that Mitchell had been recorded making racist comments during previous encounters, but those recordings had been lost or mysteriously deleted from department files. The tip led Torres to Officer Patricia Hayes, the young officer, who had been Mitchell's partner that night. Hayes had been struggling with her conscience ever since the incident, knowing that her silence had enabled Mitchell's behavior to continue. "Ms. Torres," Hayes said during their private meeting, "I need to tell you something that's going to change everything about this case." Hayes revealed that Mitchell's patrol car camera system had a feature that most people didn't know about. It continued recording for 30 minutes after each incident, even when officers thought it was turned off. This was designed to capture conversations that might be relevant to investigations, but it also meant that Mitchell's unguarded comments after his encounter with Amelia had been recorded. "He said things after you left," Hayes told Torres. "Things that showed exactly what he was thinking throughout the whole encounter. Things that make it clear this was never about drugs or traffic violations." When Torres obtained the additional recordings through a court order, she discovered comments that were even more damaging than Mitchell's behavior during the stop itself. In the 30 minutes after Amelia had driven away, Mitchell had made a series of statements to Hayes that revealed his true motivations. "These people think they can just drive around in fancy cars acting like they own the world," Mitchell had said, unaware that his every word was being recorded. "She probably got that car from some drug dealer boyfriend or something. No way she's really a doctor." But the most damaging statement came when Hayes had gently suggested that maybe they should have verified Amelia's credentials more quickly. "Hayes, let me tell you something," Mitchell had replied. "I've been doing this job for 12 years and I know trouble when I see it. These people in their expensive cars, acting all educated and professional, half the time it's just an act. You give them an inch and they think they can talk their way out of anything." When Torres played this recording in federal court, the judge stopped the proceedings and asked to speak with both attorneys in his chambers. "Counselor," Judge Robert Martinez said to Mitchell's attorney, "I hope your client understands that this recording makes his situation significantly worse. This isn't just misconduct. This is evidence of deliberate racial discrimination." Mitchell's attorney, David Goldman, had been hoping to negotiate a settlement that would allow his client to quietly resign and move on with his life. But the additional recordings had eliminated any possibility of a favorable outcome. The federal investigation had also attracted the attention of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Special Agent Lisa Thompson had been assigned to determine whether Mitchell's actions constituted a pattern of civil rights violations that warranted federal prosecution. "Dr. Washington," Agent Thompson explained during their interview, "we've identified at least 7 other incidents over the past 5 years where Officer Mitchell's behavior appears to have been motivated by racial bias. Your case provides the clearest evidence, but it's part of a much larger pattern." The FBI investigation revealed that Mitchell had been essentially operating with impunity for years, protected by a police department culture that preferred to settle complaints quietly, rather than address systemic problems. Internal Affairs had received multiple complaints about Mitchell's conduct, but supervisors had consistently found ways to minimize or dismiss them. Captain Robert Stevens, Mitchell's direct supervisor, had been particularly negligent in his oversight. When interviewed by FBI agents, Stevens admitted that he had received complaints about Mitchell's treatment of minority drivers, but had never conducted a thorough investigation. "I guess I figured these complaints were just people trying to get out of tickets," Stevens told investigators. "Mitchell was always professional when I was around, so I didn't think there was a real problem." Stevens's admission led to his own suspension and eventual resignation. 3 other supervisors were also disciplined for their failure to properly investigate complaints against Mitchell. The scandal grew even larger when local media discovered that the city had paid out over $400,000 in settlements related to Mitchell's conduct over the previous 5 years. None of these settlements had been made public, and city officials had actively worked to keep them confidential. Channel 7's Kevin Park had obtained the settlement records through a Freedom of Information lawsuit, and his follow-up investigation revealed a pattern of cover-ups that went all the way to the mayor's office, though Mayor Williams herself had not been aware of the settlements until after Amelia's case became public. The people of this city deserved to know that their tax dollars were being used to cover up police misconduct, Park reported during a special investigation that aired over 3 consecutive nights. Instead, city officials chose to protect a problem officer rather than protect the citizens he was sworn to serve. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Protests outside City Hall demanded comprehensive police reform and the resignation of officials who had enabled Mitchell's behavior. Community leaders called for federal oversight of the police department, and several civil rights organizations announced their intention to monitor future cases. For Mitchell personally, the consequences kept mounting. His police pension was suspended pending the outcome of the federal investigation. His wife filed for divorce, citing the public humiliation and death threats the family had received. His 2 teenage children were forced to change schools after being harassed by classmates who had seen the news coverage. But perhaps most devastating of all was the moment when Mitchell finally listened to the complete audio recording of his encounter with Amelia. His lawyer had insisted that he hear exactly what prosecutors would present to a jury if the case went to trial. Sitting in Goldman's office, Mitchell heard his own voice dismissing Amelia's credentials, threatening to escalate the encounter, and making assumptions based entirely on racial stereotypes. For the first time since the incident began, he seemed to understand the gravity of what he had done. "I never meant for it to go this far," Mitchell said quietly. "I thought she was just another person trying to talk her way out of a ticket." "Derek," Goldman replied, "that's exactly the problem. You saw a black woman in a nice car and assumed she was lying. You held her at gunpoint for nearly an hour because you couldn't accept that she might actually be a doctor. That's not police work. That's racial profiling." The federal charges were filed 8 months after the initial encounter. Mitchell was indicted on 3 counts: violation of civil rights under color of law, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and making false statements to federal investigators. Each count carried a potential prison sentence of up to 10 years. The police union, which had initially supported Mitchell, withdrew their backing after the additional recordings became public. Union President Michael O'Connor issued a statement saying that Mitchell's conduct violated every principle of professional law enforcement and brought shame to all honest police officers. Mitchell's trial began exactly 1 year after his encounter with Amelia. The prosecution's case was devastating in its simplicity. They played the audio recording, showed the pattern of similar incidents, and presented Mitchell's own words as evidence of his discriminatory intent. Amelia testified for 3 hours, describing her experience with calm professionalism that impressed everyone in the courtroom. She explained how Mitchell's assumptions and threats had made her fear for her life, and how the encounter had changed her relationship with law enforcement forever. "I want to be clear," Amelia said during her testimony. "I don't believe all police officers are like Derek Mitchell. I work with many officers in the emergency room, and most of them are dedicated professionals who treat everyone with respect. But Officer Mitchell's behavior shows what happens when prejudice is allowed to override training and common sense. Dr. Chen testified about arriving at the scene and finding a colleague being treated like a criminal for no apparent reason. Officer Hayes testified about her growing discomfort with Mitchell's escalating behavior and her regret at not speaking up sooner. The defense strategy was to portray Mitchell as a dedicated officer who had made a mistaken judgment during a stressful situation, but the additional recordings made this argument impossible to sustain.